This story is based on true events, or at least that's what they told themselves in the quiet hours when the house creaked like it was breathing regrets of its own. In the small town of Eldridge Hollow, nestled between fog-shrouded hills where the pines whispered secrets to the wind, there lived a family bound not by blood alone but by the invisible threads of unspoken pain. Her name was Eleanor Voss. She was the quiet anchor of the Voss household, the woman who mended socks with trembling hands and baked apple pies that filled the air with the scent of autumn long before the leaves turned. But beneath her gentle eyes, lined with the faint etchings of exhaustion, lay a story that refused to stay buried. A story that clawed its way back from the grave, demanding to be heard. Because sometimes the dead don't rest until the living face the truth they've buried deeper than any coffin. Eleanor was 47 when she left them. Not by choice, they said at first. A slip in the night down the old oak staircase that groaned like an old man's bones. The coroner called it an accident, head trauma from the fall, instant and merciful. But mercy has a way of curdling in the presence of doubt. Her daughter Clara, who had fled Eldridge Hollow a decade earlier, returned for the funeral with a heart already fractured, pieces jagged from years of silence. Clara was 32 now, her once bright curls dulled to a practical bob, her artist's hands calloused from waitressing in a city that chewed dreams and spat out survivors. She stood at the graveside, rain pattering on the black umbrella like impatient fingers, and wondered why the earth seemed to swallow her mother whole without a fight. The Voss family plot was modest, hemmed in by rusted iron fences overgrown with ivy, as if nature itself conspired to choke the memories. Elias, her father, stood stoic beside her, his face a map of furrows deepened by whiskey and widowhood. And then there was Thomas, her younger brother, 28 and adrift, his eyes darting like a cornered animal's, avoiding the polished mahogany casket that held the woman who had raised them both with a love as fierce as it was fragile. The service was brief, the way small-town funerals often are, words from the pastor about eternal light, a hymn sung off-key by Aunt Miriam whose voice cracked on the high notes like brittle glass. Clara felt it then, the first stir of something unnatural, a chill that seeped through her wool coat unrelated to the drizzle soaking the ground. As they lowered the casket, a gust of wind tore through the cemetery, scattering lilies across the mud. One petal landed at Clara's feet, blood-red against the gray, and for a split second she swore she heard a whisper. Not the wind, but a voice soft, insistent, laced with the faint lilt of her mother's Tennessee drawl. "Clara, child, listen." She shook it off as grief's cruel mimicry, but that night in the family home that smelled of mothballs and stale regret, the whispers returned. The Voss house was a relic, built in 1892 with walls thick enough to hold secrets and floors warped from a century of footsteps. Clara had grown up in its shadowed corners, chasing fireflies through the backyard while Eleanor hummed lullabies in the kitchen. Those were the golden days, or so memory painted them, before the arguments that started as murmurs and swelled into storms. Elias Voss had been a mill worker, his hands rough from handling timber, his temper forged in the same fire that hardened the logs he cut. He loved Eleanor in his way, a possessive love that bruised as often as it comforted. Clara remembered the nights she waked to the sound of shattering porcelain, her mother's muffled sobs echoing down the hall. "Hush now, darlin'," Eleanor would say the next morning, dabbing Clara's scraped knee with iodine, her own cheek blooming purple like a storm cloud. "Men carry heavy loads, we just gotta lighten 'em where we can." But Clara at 16 had seen enough. She'd packed a duffel bag with her sketchpads and dreams of art school, kissing her mother's forehead in the dim pre-dawn light. "I'll send for you," she'd promised, tears hot on her cheeks. Eleanor had smiled then, that weary, world-weary curve of lips that hid oceans of ache. "Go chase your stars, baby girl, I'll be right here holding the lantern." 10 years passed like smoke through fingers. Clara's letters home dwindled from weekly confessions to holiday cards, each one a stab of guilt. The city had been a whirlwind, auditions that led nowhere, lovers who came and went like seasons, a gallery show that folded before it opened. She'd built a life, brittle but her own, telling herself distance was mercy. For her mother, for herself. But now, standing in the kitchen where Eleanor had once stirred gravy with a wooden spoon worn smooth by love, Clara felt the weight of every unsaid word. The house was a tomb of mementos, a quilt draped over the sofa stitched with Eleanor's careful hands, a porcelain doll on the mantel, its glass eyes staring accusatory, faded Polaroids pinned to the fridge, capturing birthdays and Christmases where smiles strained at the seams. Elias shuffled in that first evening, his flannel shirt rumpled, offering a tumbler of bourbon with a grunt. "To your ma," he said, clinking glasses. His eyes, bloodshot and hollow, avoided hers. Thomas hovered in the doorway, picking at a hangnail, his silence louder than any scream. That night sleep evaded Clara like a thief in the dark. She lay in her childhood bed, the mattress sagging under ghosts of girlhood, listening to the house settle. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters like impatient knuckles. And then it came, a knock, soft but deliberate, from the foot of the bed. Clara bolted upright, heart hammering, the room bathed in moonlight that slanted through lace curtains like silver blades. Nothing. Just shadows dancing on the wallpaper, faded florals that Eleanor had chosen for their cheer. But the air felt thick, charged, as if the molecules themselves held their breath. She reached for the bedside lamp, fingers fumbling, and that's when she saw it. On the dresser, her mother's silver locket, the one she'd buried with her that morning. It lay open, chain coiled like a serpent, and inside the tiny photograph of the three of them, Clara, Thomas, and Eleanor, smudged with fingerprints that weren't hers. A sob caught in her throat, raw and unbidden. "Mom," she whispered, the word cracking like dry earth. The locket snapped shut on its own, a click sharp as a gunshot in the silence. And from the walls, or perhaps from the very air, came the voice again, "Forgive Clara before it's too late." She didn't sleep after that. Dawn crept in grudgingly, painting the room in hues of bruised lavender. Downstairs, Elias was already at the table, nursing coffee black as his mood. "Bad dreams?" he asked, not looking up from his paper. Clara slid into the chair opposite, the locket burning a hole in her pocket. "Something like that," she murmured, her voice a threadbare whisper. Thomas stumbled in next, hair tousled, eyes puffy from whatever demons chased him through the night. He was the baby of the family, the one Eleanor had doted on with a fierceness that bordered on desperation. Clara remembered how her mother would slip him extra cookies, brush his hair with gentle fingers as if compensating for the storms Elias unleashed. Thomas had stayed in Eldridge Hollow after Clara left, working odd jobs at the mill, drifting through life like fog. "Heard you up late," he said, pouring cereal with unsteady hands. "Ghosts keeping you company?" His laugh was forced, brittle. Clara's gaze sharpened. There was something in his eyes, a flicker of knowledge or fear that made her stomach twist. The days blurred into a haze of estate settling and condolences. Neighbors dropped off casseroles wrapped in foil, their whispers trailing like smoke. Poor Eleanor, always so quiet about her troubles. Elias could be a handful, God rest him. Clara sifted through drawers, folding sweaters that still carried her mother's scent, lavender and faint sweat, the perfume of perseverance. In the attic, amid dust motes dancing like fireflies, she found the journals. Leather-bound spines cracked from use, hidden beneath a floorboard as if Eleanor had known they'd be discovered someday. The entries began innocently enough. Recipes jotted in the margins, prayers for rain, notes on Clara's art contests won in elementary school. But as the pages turned, the ink grew darker, the words weighted with a sorrow that seeped through the paper. Elias came home raging again tonight. "The bottle makes him mean, Lord, but I see the boy I married in there still, lost and lashing out." Thomas hears it all, hides under his bed. Clara's letters say she's happy, praise God for that, but oh, how I miss her laugh filling these walls. Clara's chest tightened, tears blurring the script. Deeper in, the confessions sharpened to knives. The fall wasn't the first. There was that night in '09 when he grabbed my wrist so hard it snapped like kindling. Told the doctor it was the stairs, same as always. Can't let the children know their father's not a monster, just a man drowning. And then the entry that stopped her breath. Thomas knows more than he lets on. Saw him watching last time, eyes wide as saucers. If I go before I tell them, who will? The truth is a chain, heavy but freeing. Clara, my girl, if you read this, run, but come back, forgive us all. She sat there on the attic floorboards, knees drawn to her chest, the journal clutched like a lifeline. The air grew cold, unnaturally so, and the candle she'd lit for light guttered, casting elongated shadows that writhed like specters. A floorboard creaked behind her, no, not a creak, a step. Clara whipped around, heart in her throat, but the attic was empty save for cobwebs and cardboard boxes yellowed with age. Yet the voice came again, clearer this time, wrapping around her like a shawl woven from mist. "Read on, daughter. The pages hold what I couldn't say." The journal fell open in her lap to a date 5 years past, the ink smudged as if by tears. "The money's gone. Elias gambled it away at the track, the house payment with it. Thomas helped him cover it up, my boy, so eager to please his pa, but the bank's coming. I can't let them lose this home, the only roof we've known. If I end it, the insurance. God forgive me for even thinking it." Suicide, the word hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire, not an accident. Eleanor had planned it, scripted her exit with the precision of a woman who'd spent decades scripting survival. Clara's mind reeled, fragments of memory slotting into place like puzzle pieces long lost. The way her mother had hugged her tighter those last visits, the forced brightness in her voice during phone calls. "Everything's fine here, sugar, you focus on you." Lies, all of it layered thick to protect. But why? Why carry it alone? Rage bubbled up, hot and unfiltered, aimed at Elias for his fists and failures, at Thomas for his complicity, at herself for the miles she'd put between them. She stormed downstairs, journal in hand, the locket swinging like a pendulum against her chest. Elias was in the garage, tinkering with his old truck, the radio crooning country ballads about lost love. "Dad," Clara said, voice steel-edged. He straightened, wiping grease from his hands on a rag, his face paling at the book in her grip. "What the hell is this?" She thrust it forward, pages splaying open like wounds. He glanced, then away, jaw working like he was chewing gravel. "Your mother's ramblings, private." "Private?" Clara's laugh was bitter, shards of glass. "She wrote about you breaking her, Dad, about the debts, the beatings, about ending it all so we wouldn't lose this goddamn house." Elias' eyes, those stormy seas she'd navigated as a child, darkened. "You don't know shit, girl, life's not fairy tales. I loved her, still do, we had our fights like any." But his voice cracked, betraying the lie. Thomas appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices, his face ashen. Clara, stop, it's not true. Mom said you knew Tommy. You helped him hide it all. The garage fell silent save for the radio's mournful twang. Thomas's shoulders slumped, defeat etching lines into his young face. It was one time, he whispered. The money, Pa needed help wiring it back before the bank saw. Mom found out, confronted us. She said she'd handle it, said insurance was double if it looked like an accident. Elias turned away, fists clenched, the rag twisting in his grip until it tore. Clara felt the world tilt, the foundations of her childhood crumbling like dry rot. You let her, both of you? Thomas's eyes met hers, brimming with a pain that mirrored her own. She made us promise, said it was her choice to keep us together. I tried to talk her out, begged her, but she smiled, Clara, like she was finally free. That night the house wept rain, sheets of it lashing the windows like accusations. Clara paced her room, the journal's words burning behind her eyelids. Sleep came in fits, dreams where Eleanor's face loomed translucent and pleading, her mouth moving in silent pleas. Tell them, child, let the light in. She woke gasping, the locket clutched in her fist, its chain warm as living skin. Down the hall a door creaked, Thomas's room. She slipped into the corridor, floorboards cold under bare feet, and pushed his door open. He sat on the edge of his bed, head in hands, a half-empty bottle of scotch beside him. Can't sleep either, she asked softly. He looked up, eyes red-rimmed, and for the first time she saw the boy he'd been scared, small, buried under years of manhood's weight. Every night since, he confessed, voice raw. I see her at the top of the stairs, looking back, like she wanted me to stop her. They talk then. Words spilling like blood from a reopened vein. Thomas unburdened the fragments he'd carried. The nights he'd eavesdrop on his parents' fights, the way Eleanor's bruises became his map to avoidance, ducking out to friends' houses or the woods behind the mill. She'd cover for me, he said, a ghost of a smile. Tell Pa I was studying when I was just hiding. After you left, it got worse. She leaned on me more like I was the man of the house. Clara listened, her anger fracturing into empathy, sharp-edged but softening. Why didn't you call me? Thomas shrugged, helpless. You were gone, building something real, didn't want to drag you back into this mess. She reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining like roots seeking soil. We're in it now, together. Elias joined them at dawn, summoned by the murmur of voices. He stood in the doorway, a silhouette against the paling sky, his flannel untucked like a flag of surrender. Heard enough, he rumbled, but there was no fight in it, only weariness bone deep. Clara held out the journal. Read it, Dad, all of it. He took it reluctantly, sinking into the armchair by the window, pages turning slow as confessions. Room filled with the sound of his breathing, ragged at first, then steadying into sobs that shook his broad frame. I never meant. Words failed him, dissolving into apologies that tasted of salt and regret. She was my world, Clara, broke me every time I hurt her. The drinking, the gambling, it was my shame, not hers to carry. Thomas nodded, silent tears carving paths down his cheeks. Clara watched her father, the giant of her nightmares, reduced to a man pleading for absolution. She forgave you, she said finally, the locket heavy in her palm. But we have to forgive ourselves and each other. The days that followed were a fragile thaw. They burned the debt's records in the backyard fire pit, watching flames devour the evidence of Eleanor's sacrifice. Elias swore off the bottle, attending meetings at the church basement where men like him gathered to rebuild. Thomas started therapy, unraveling the knots of complicity that bound him. Clara stayed, sketching the house in charcoal strokes, its lines softer now, less haunted. But the whispers persisted, gentle visitations in the hush of midnight. Objects moved, a teacup placed just so on the table, steam rising in curls that spelled peace. Dreams where Eleanor appeared not as a specter but whole, laughing in the kitchen, her hands flour-dusted, pulling Clara into a flower fight that ended in giggles. I'm here, baby, she'd say, voice warm as fresh bread. Always was. The beyond's just a veil, thin as spider silk. One evening, as summer's end painted the hills in amber, Clara found a letter tucked into the journal's back cover. Eleanor's script, looping and loving. If you're reading this, I've crossed over. Don't mourn the how, mourn the whys we left unsaid. Tell your father I loved his laugh, the one he saved for fireflies. Tell Thomas he's stronger than he knows, my brave boy. And Clara, my star chaser, come home when you're ready. Forgiveness isn't a door you lock, it's a window you open. Let the light flood in. Tears fell freely as Clara read, folding the paper into her heart. She gathered Elias and Thomas in the living room, the space once a battlefield now a sanctuary, and shared the words. They cried together, a triad of grief transmogrified into grace, hands linked in a circle unbroken. As autumn deepened, leaves carpeting the yard in crimson and gold, Clara felt the pull of the city lesson. She opened a small studio in town, teaching art to wide-eyed kids who reminded her of her younger self, fierce, dreaming, unscarred. The Voss house breathed easier, its walls echoing with laughter instead of laments. Elias hung Eleanor's quilt in the hall, a banner of endurance. Thomas planted a garden out back, roses climbing the trellis where fireflies still danced. And Clara wore the locket always, its weight a talisman against forgetting. But it was on All Hallows' Eve, under a moon fat and silver, that the final communion came. Clara sat on the porch steps, sketchpad idle in her lap, the air crisp with the scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves. The wind stirred, carrying that familiar lilt, "Well done, my loves." She looked up, and there, ethereal, luminous, stood Eleanor. Not a ghost of terror, but a vision of peace, her sundress fluttering like petals, smile radiant as dawn. No words passed, only a nod profound as scripture and a hand pressed to her heart. Then she faded, dissolving into starlight, leaving behind a warmth that bloomed eternal. In Eldridge Hollow, the Voss family learned that truths buried deepest rise strongest. Eleanor's voice from beyond wasn't a curse but a catalyst, a bridge across the chasm of regret. They forgave not in perfection but in the messy miracle of trying. And in that forgiveness they found her again, whole and waiting. Don't wait for death to tell the truth, it might be too late to forgive.